Thank you, Albert. I have the privilege today of officially serving as the welcome on behalf of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and I will do that quickly before I introduce our next speaker. As I mentioned earlier, it was in 2013 that this conference first began, and we were really thrilled to be able to host it here at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. It occurred after a discussion with, at the time, Governor Duke about the importance of beginning to center academic research on this topic of community banking. And John Ryan, I believe at the very same time you were saying we need academic research on this topic of community banking. And one of the early decisions was, where do you host a conference like this? So we could have hosted it in Washington, but when you really think about what community banking is and where community banks are located, there are so many here in the heartland of the country. Whether it's North Dakota to Minnesota, yes, I still have the dialect for the people from Minnesota. I still remember that from my childhood. To Texas and Louisiana, we have many, many, many community banks in this part of the country, and so it is appropriate, I think, to bring everyone together in the center of the country. But I hope you all, my colleagues on the Supervision Committee of the Federal Reserve, the bank commissioners, John and staff, also realize how much we've accomplished. Over the course of the last 5 years, we've reviewed 150 papers that are centered on this topic of community banking. While certainly not in the thousands, it's a very notable start to a very important topic. And importantly, more than 50 of those papers have reached the level that they have been presented here at one of the conferences over the last 5 years. The importance of the academic research is that we know these issues are very important and emotional issues. The academic research quantifies the issue, making it very helpful to policymakers. By the end of this conference, we will have also heard from multiple prominent community bankers and thought leaders on the state of the industry. I know of the many bankers here today. Obviously, I hope you feel very proud that your commissioner invited you to join us, and we're thrilled to have you here. But it is your voice and the practical implications of what we are learning from the academic research that adds to the richness of our discussion over the course of the next day. I would note that we have had attendees from just about every state in the United States and also begun to see international academic research on issues facing domestic community banks. So again, good progress in that regard. We're sometimes asked, well, okay, great, we have a conference and it's a great opportunity for academics to meet with practitioners, but what have you really accomplished? As we look back at what we've gained, we think probably one of the biggest accomplishments is we've finally created a place where this important research on the issues facing community banks is easily accessible and available for researchers to build upon. It's no longer a dream of what might be. It is now a foundation of what might grow. We've also begun to see the benefits of that from the standpoint of sites. We've seen in various papers produced by various agencies or academic researchers cites to papers that have been published at this conference, exactly what we intended when the original idea was brought forward. We've also had the opportunity now to begin to develop trend data through the bank commissioners in your survey of community banks. Yes, we experimented a little bit in the early years, but we have a process down now where we'll be able to create data over the course of many years through your efforts that allow us to begin to get at some very important issues, things such as the cost of regulation, or where is the trend in emerging competition in community banks. And importantly, last year, one of our academic papers actually leveraged that data, which was part of the dream when we originally came up with the idea of asking you to conduct a survey. Of course, we also believe we've achieved an ongoing dialogue between the industry, the academics, and the regulators. And as you'll see in our research panels over the next few days, where we have certainly the academic component of what the paper says, you'll really, I think, enjoy hearing the banker's perspective on what that research means to the practical aspects of community banking. We have had conference participants tell us that bringing a community banking voice into the research discussion is one of the most valuable components of this conference, if not one of the more unusual ones. We've also heard that the substantive interactions and networking breaks really do facilitate dialogue that might not occur otherwise. And so we very much appreciate the connections that you've been making. There are many elements to this conference that I know I'm personally very proud of, but I'd like to mention one of those, and that is that it was last year that one of our participants was very interested in the presentation by the winning college case study competition team. So Lori Bettinger then invited that team to participate in a conference that she was part of the host of, allowing those students not just to see the value and fruit of the work they had been put in over the course of a year, but also to carry it on to other venues. So the ability to take it to the next step is starting to emerge. I also want to recognize another component that I think has been very important, and that has been what the case study competition means for students, our next generation, our successors. I hate to say it, but I have to give Mike Stevens, where's Mike? There you are, credit for coming up with the idea. But to see the energy on the part of students who probably thought of banking as being something that was a negative newspaper headline, well, to see that change is pretty remarkable. But I think importantly, and just an anecdotal story on my own part, to see colleges and universities now become interested in establishing an academic curriculum on banking is very encouraging. Just heard it today in my permanent home in Fort Collins, Colorado, that Colorado State University is planning to begin looking at development of a curriculum. So I know those are very small outcomes of it, but the idea that there are the proper incentives to encourage interest in this subject certainly has to be viewed as very encouraging for all of us. Well, with that background in mind, we're going to turn to the important part of our session right now, and that is to welcome the chair of the Federal Reserve System, Janet Yellen. Janet has been a very strong and visible force in the Federal Reserve System since the inception of this conference. In fact, I think you've been here before as you visited the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and your presence is certainly very motivating to all of us. Now, many of you are familiar with Janet's official bio, both academically, graduating summa cum laude from Brown University with a degree in economics and receiving her doctorate from Yale University in 1971. Of course, she was also a faculty member at the University of California, Berkeley, then went on to become a member of the Board of Governors, decided to try the other side of the Federal Reserve, and became the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, which I would suspect was probably a dream job. And then later came back to the Board of Governors to become vice chair and then chair of the Federal Reserve. Now, some of you may not be as familiar with Janet Yellen, the person. So I'd like to speak to that. In my view, Janet is a unique individual, and frankly, she's been one of my role models, even though she probably doesn't know that. Janet serves this country with unparalleled dedication and unwavering focus on the mission of the Federal Reserve System, which is not always so easy in today's world. But more than that, Janet serves with humility and gentleness. She heads the country's central bank, and I think because of that, perhaps I should be a little bit fearful. Yet when I pass her in the hall or greet her at the front door, I really do feel like I can say, "Hi, Janet," and give her a hug. So that is Janet Yellen. Please join me in welcoming her to the podium.